Running out of money in retirement, the nightmare scenario no one wants. The solution isn't necessarily more savings, it's smarter organization. The three-bucket refill strategy has helped countless retirees sleep better at night with sustainable income regardless of market conditions. You asked, and I'm delivering. After hundreds of comments on my portfolio update videos, one question keeps appearing. How do I maintain these buckets over time? Today, I'm showing you exactly how to refill your retirement buckets so they never run dry. The strategy so many of you have been waiting for. I'll cover 3 key scenarios for refilling your buckets: bull markets, bear markets, and how to adapt to changing conditions. Plus, I'll share a real-world example to make this concrete. Think of it as your personal pension system, the now, soon, and later approach that gives you both immediate cash flow and long-term growth potential. Before diving into refill strategies, let's quickly review the 3 buckets. There's your cash bucket with 1 to 2 years of expenses, your income bucket covering 3 to 7 years, and your growth bucket handling everything else beyond that. It's simple, effective, and proven. The refill strategy I'm about to share is what separates comfortable retirees from those constantly worried about market swings. Like most financial questions, the answer to when and how to refill your bucket is, it depends. There are so many factors at play: market conditions, your spending patterns, and how your investments are performing overall. Let's talk market conditions first. We need to consider if stocks are up or down. Are interest rates high or low? And if the market is particularly volatile or not. All of these factors will influence your refill strategy, your practical guide to bucket rebalancing. While I've only been retired for 8 months now, I'm following the proven system detailed by Fritz Gilbert at the Retirement Manifesto, with my own observations from implementing it in my personal finances. So let me break down exactly when and how to rebalance your 3 retirement buckets throughout different market cycles. Let's start with the timing of when you should be checking on your buckets. I recommend setting up a regular schedule that looks something like this: quarterly reviews. Mark your calendar for a simple portfolio check-in every 3 months. Annual deep dive. Once yearly, do a comprehensive review of all 3 buckets. Trigger events. Additionally, rebalance after major market movements about 10% or life changes. Now let's talk about what to do during different market conditions, starting with the good times. During bull markets, when stocks are climbing, it's generally a great time to replenish your cash and income buckets by selling some assets from your growth bucket. You're essentially locking in those profits. Here's what your bull market strategy might look like. Bull market strategy when stocks are up. The cash bucket. Keep fully funded with 1 to 2 years of expenses, plus add 10 to 15% as surplus. The income bucket. Replenish from growth bucket gains, locking in profits. Your growth bucket. Sell high-performing assets strategically to fund other buckets. It's helpful to prioritize selling assets with the lowest tax impacts. My personal approach in strong markets: I prefer to sell some growth assets to not only fully fund my cash bucket, but add a little extra on top. Think of it as keeping your baseline 1 to 2 years of expenses intact while adding a cushion for extra security. But what about when markets aren't quite so friendly? This is when your strategy really needs to shift. During bear markets, when stocks are declining, you'll want to protect your growth assets and give them time to recover. Bear market strategy when stocks are down. The cash bucket. You'll draw primarily from this bucket for living expenses. The income bucket. Use dividends and interest to partially refill your cash bucket. The growth bucket. Avoid selling if at all possible to give assets time to recover. And spending adjustments are important too. Cut discretionary expenses by 10 to 20% if at all possible. Now, what about those flat or sideways markets that aren't clearly bull or bear? That's when your income bucket really shines. During these more neutral periods, lean more heavily on your income bucket while being more conservative with rebalancing. Only make adjustments when your allocations drift by about 5% or more from your targets. To reduce timing risk, keep making regular, smaller transfers between buckets using a dollar cost averaging approach. Regardless of market conditions, there's a logical sequence to follow when refilling your buckets. Think of it as a priority list that helps you make decisions consistently. The refill sequence, priority order. Use income bucket interest and dividends to refill cash bucket first. If more is needed, strategically sell from growth bucket during strength. In weak markets, draw down cash bucket before touching other buckets. Only tap growth bucket in down markets as a last resort. Now, to make all this easier to manage, I recommend setting up some automation. This has been a game changer for me, even in my short time in retirement. Set up automatic dividend and interest transfers to cash bucket and establish threshold-based alerts for when buckets need attention. Tax implications matter too. Withdrawals from Roth accounts won't trigger taxes, but traditional IRAs and brokerage accounts will have tax consequences. So this is an important part of your planning. Talk with your accountant to optimize your personal tax situation. Remember, this isn't a rigid system. It's a framework that adapts to your specific situation and market conditions. The goal isn't perfect timing, but consistent, disciplined management that keeps your retirement strategy on track regardless of what the market throws at you. Let me show you how this works with a real example. Exactly the kind of scenario we focus on in this channel. Let's consider our typical 500K retirement model, a single person with $18,000 in annual Social Security, $50,000 in total income needs, and $500,000 portfolio. This is the Retire on 500K blueprint we've been exploring together. In an up market, they might leave their $64,000 cash bucket, roughly 2 years of their expenses after Social Security, untouched as their emergency reserve while taking regular distributions, maybe $2,600 monthly, from their growth bucket. The cash bucket stays full while they benefit from favorable selling conditions. There's no rule about withdrawal frequency either. Some people prefer monthly withdrawals, others quarterly, or even annual. I personally like smaller, more frequent withdrawals because it keeps more of my money invested and growing for longer periods. I've set mine up to do automatic monthly withdrawals. Think about it. If you withdraw a huge chunk at the beginning of the year, that money loses months of potential growth. Since markets historically have more up years than down years, keeping your money invested often works in your favor. I also view that middle income bucket as a cash bucket refill source. Maybe you've got laddered CDs or dividend stocks in there like I do. You can set up those interest payments and dividends to flow directly into your cash bucket. This approach lets your growth investments stay untouched longer, potentially generating better returns over time. Now, what about down markets? This is when your fully funded cash bucket really proves its worth. When markets are tanking, I'd recommend relying heavily on your cash reserves rather than selling growth assets at a loss. Going back to our example of a single person with that $64,000 cash bucket during market downturns, they'd primarily spend from this reserve. As CDs mature and dividends come in from the income bucket, those funds would help partially replenish the cash bucket. But the key is avoiding selling growth assets when they're down, if at all possible. The silver lining to all this planning is that consecutive down years in the market are pretty rare. That's exactly why having that cash bucket is so powerful. It gives your long-term investments breathing room to recover before you need to tap them again. Market recoveries are unpredictable. Sometimes they're super fast, other times they drag out for years. And with the current pace of change and chaos in our economy, it's hard to predict. Ideally, your cash bucket buys enough time for your growth investments to bounce back before you need to sell anything. An ideal scenario is to preserve your principal and live off returns alone. While this strategy helps with that goal, let's be realistic. In prolonged bear markets, you might eventually need to sell some assets at a loss. If that happens, consider whether tax loss harvesting might help offset some of the damage. Again, this is where professional advice could really pay off. So how do I think about bucket refills in an ideal world? In up markets, your cash bucket acts like an emergency fund while you take regular distributions from your income and growth buckets. In down markets, you rely heavily on your cash reserves, use income bucket proceeds to partially refill cash, and avoid touching the growth bucket until recovery happens. Higher interest environments can be helpful too. Your cash accounts might generate enough interest that you need less from other buckets to maintain your reserves. What I love most about the 3-bucket system is that it eliminates the constant worry about, should I sell now? When the market drops, your decision is already made. You don't sell from your growth bucket, period. It really helps me sleep at night. Will this approach work perfectly 100% of the time? Of course not. Real life isn't that predictable. We all know that. But these guidelines will give you the best shot at preserving and growing your nest egg over the long haul. It's all about adapting your bucket refill strategy to current conditions rather than following a rigid formula. So your immediate next step is to categorize your current investments into these 3 buckets. Take 15 minutes this week to label each account as cash, income, or growth. Then evaluate if they're properly balanced for your situation. What do you think? Are you considering the 3-bucket strategy for your retirement? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If this bucket refill strategy helped you feel more confident about your retirement plans, consider buying me a cup of coffee. The link is below. Your support helps me continue creating in-depth retirement planning content like this without sponsor influence. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to catch my next retirement strategy video. By the way, if you haven't seen my detailed breakdown of the 3-bucket strategy fundamentals, I've got you covered. I did a whole video walking through exactly how to set up these buckets from scratch. It'll give you all the background you need to make this refill strategy even more powerful. So check it out.